Hey traders, Raghi here, and coming to you with a mid-morning update on a holiday affected Friday. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. Everything that I'm going to talk to you about really should start with the fact that if there is a day that you don't want to be trading, it's Friday. And then if you add on top of that the fact that this is a holiday affected Friday, it definitely makes me do a couple things. Smaller size. So I'm going to be trading smaller size for sure. And I'm going to be looking at, I'm using a new mouse, so I don't know what that is. It's certainly not English language. But yeah, Fridays hate traders. Holiday Fridays especially hate traders. And of course, do they hate traders? No. It's really the kind of lack of organization that we're likely to see. So let's start off with the alerts that I sent out today. And I'm willing to trade a holiday Friday, again, just smaller size, and realizing that they're all aggressive. And you'll notice that I label the alerts as aggressive or not. And all three alerts this morning were pre-30-minute breaches, so of course they're aggressive. What do you think when it's aggressive? Okay, Raghi's telling me there's a slightly lower probability and I should trade smaller size or pass altogether. That's the takeaway there. That's why we label those with aggressive. All right, so let's take the first one I sent out, and that was the YM 5-minute breach. What I'm going to do is sort of recreate the environment so you could see what it was, what I was looking at live as I was sending this out. So take a look here. Was this a legit breach? Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. Again, I think the backdrop of all this, the punchline of all this is, oh, but it's a holiday affected Friday, which is about the worst kind of Friday you can get. But did I have structure? Yes, absolutely. Did we actually get the breach through our high? Absolutely. That was right up in here. The trigger fired off. Now, it's a 1-2 combination. 1, could you take the breach? Yes. Do we prefer the retreat? Absolutely. But let's talk about the risk. This first line represents the risk from the breach level to the opposite end of the clearing. Now, could we have used something below 600? You know, I think if we were looking at a 30-minute breach, I probably would say, yeah, go ahead and risk the extra 15, 20 points or whatnot. The truth of the matter is, this is an aggressive trade on a holiday affected Friday. It probably doesn't merit that much more latitude, quite frankly. If you waited for the retreat, which was sitting at 625, which is actually even lower than what I had here, down here, okay? That particular entry, so let's say you got long at 625 or you bought calls at 625. For those of you that are wondering, Rog, could I look at a 595 stop with that entry? Yeah, that makes more sense. So do you see the difference between the breach entry, where I tell you use the opposite end of the range, versus the retreat entry, which, by the way, is still valid to have a stop at the opposite end of the range, but because of the much preferable, better priced entry, if you wanted to give the market a little bit more latitude, you could have to give it 595. That's really up to you. There's no magical number where I'll tell you, well, if you give it a little bit more latitude, it could have stayed an open trade. No, just ask yourself, am I comfortable with the case of the breach there? Am I comfortable with a YM entry at 660 with a stop at 595? Or am I comfortable with a 660 with a stop at, say, 615, where it's a 45-point risk? If you get in at 625, obviously 615 is a 10-point risk. And if you get in at 625 with the 595, then it's a 30-point risk. Retreats almost always give you much more preferable risk rewards. Okay? That's the first 5 minutes. Let's move on to the 30-minute breach, which is the more conservative of this. So 30-minute breach, high-low range, certainly does not break the allowable HPMR, which is the distance from the high to the low. So when we get this right here, that is a legitimate breach short. The retreat closer to the point of control in this little envelope, if you will, this space between the two volume weighted average prices, we never touched it. The only thing my Dow traders could have done is play the retest. Now the retest Okay, we'll just label that with RE. The retest is important for my options traders. Why? Because you cannot get a decent priced put with all the bearish momentum that you would have seen to the breach level and then into that breach level. You just would have been paying up or chasing the entry, which I don't want you to do, because then you've, in my estimation, paid too much. This bounce, even though it still represents the same amount of risk as the breach entry would have, the momentum that we're seeing into that level allows for traders to build a lower priced option position with puts, because the momentum coming back up into that same exact level that we just finished breaking down is now bullish, not bearish, and you guys will notice your options pricing is better. And so that's pretty much what we've seen so far on the Dow today, which, you know, considering the holiday, not awful, not awful. Okay, next was the NQ. Let's talk about the NAS. We had a 15-minute potential breach. Let me recreate that scenario. All right. And yes, this video is going to probably run a little bit longer than our typical mid-morning updates, but I really want to be thorough. So, ... do I have a breach? We never breached. Do you see that? We never had a breach up in here. So there's nothing to do. I mean, that's an easy decision, right? There's nothing to do up here. There's no breach. So this is, you know, no, right? Okay. So we keep moving on. Now remember, for any of the early pre-30-minute breaches, you need dots. So even though it looks like the 15-minute fired short, we did not have the necessary dots for that levels, for that time kind of chunk, that 15-minute chunk of time to breach the downside. It didn't have the dots, no dice. 30 minutes next, and here it is. There's your breach at the 30-minute mark. Now, I was looking for a bounce a little bit more like the point of control up here, closer to 68 or 70. But we did get to the volume weighted average price, which some retreat is better than no retreat. That's your breach. Here's a kind of aggressive retreat. I was looking, like I said, for something up in here, but that is a short, gang. That is a pure and simple short. Or nothing if you didn't get the level that you wanted, which I totally can understand. Again, Friday, holiday affected Friday. Remember, right? Really important to remember. Okay, so that's the NASDAQ. That's the NASDAQ. 15-minute never fired, 30-minute did. We did not get a retreat. Actually, we did not even get a retest, quite frankly. It was a breach or a much more aggressive test of the volume weighted average price zone. All right, next and last is the Russell. Okay. All right. Now the Russell was a 15-minute potential breach, and it did fire off. Let me recreate that Russell trade. Go back to this 15-minute setting. Okay, so this is a legit buy. And for those of you that are asking, and the same thing applied to the YM, notice that when we did even have the YM, we were above the volume weighted average price, all three of those levels. And here we are again, above all three anchored VWAPs. And we broke the threshold. We did have the dots. Now, some of you might say, and this is fine, that when we had the 15-minute breach, we kind of lost the dots for a while. And some of you will probably have passed on this, because in this interim in here, we had no dots, right? Technically, all I need are dots into 945. Okay? Do you preferably want dots right up into the breach? That's just really preference, gang. Now, if you want to be strictly interpreting a breach, yes, I would like to have the dots right up into the breach. But you've seen that sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. It really depends on your level of what a qualified 5 and 15 breach would be. In other words, A, as long as the dots lasted into the 945, if it didn't, there's no breach to even be talking about. But if you actually want the breach when the price breaks the level, the breach to still have dots, well then in cases like this, there was nothing to talk about. No yellow, no red, no green, no nothing, right? But that was a breach on the no dot requirement, which is fine. Again, everyone here is going to find their preference for how specific the environment must be, how specific the clarity and organization must be. There's your breach. Now we focus on a retreat, and you can see that right in here. Had a nice little retreat, bounced right back up to the clearing, and then tested this for some time until this thing just sank. Now, was there a short to be had on the Russell? Gang, I think really if you took this trade, even though it lost to dots, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you it's invalid. It's just more aggressive. But what I will say is there was really no way to say, one, this trade fired off a short. It did not. Okay, because notice we didn't actually break until way past 10:30. So this right here, if you're wondering, was that a breach short? It was not. It was after the allowable window. So the Russell was basically either nothing because we lost the dots into the entry, or it was a buy because at least we had the dots into 945. In fact, the dots lasted clear until 948. Okay? And so that we had the breach, we had the retreat, we came back up to the clearing range, and then you can see the market succumb to basically what this holiday Friday seems to have really been, which is really nobody's home. I don't believe we have a lot of sellers in this market. I don't think we have obviously we don't have a bunch of buyers here either, but just nobody's home. It just feels like a Friday, certainly affected by the holiday. So by the time we got to about 10:15, the NQ breach and the YM breaches, just cancel those orders if you are looking for anything else to the upside. Again, the YM 5-minute, let's go back to that YM because that might have been a confusing alert. Again, so much is lost in translation when I'm not on the mic with you guys. But if you are looking for anything else by 10:13, as far as breaches, it was already, again, 10:13 right in here, it was already done, right? It was already done. If you didn't get your fill, we were looking for a retreat, maybe a retest. We got none of that. The market just sank, okay? So one other thing I want to remind everybody before we wrap up this video is if we don't get the breach, you cannot play the retreat. And until you get the breach, you don't have the market tipping its hand to you. So until you get a breach, preferably a 30-minute, it's more conservative, but even the 5 or 15, when they breach with the dots, I still believe, again, on normal days, and today is far from a normal day, but on normal days, you will get that follow through. The probability is very high that you have enough structure for a follow through. On a Friday, not so much. On a holiday affected Friday, you can see that it's almost like the market doesn't even care about structure the way we do on sort of regular days. Okay? And again, please note that the volume has been anemic. And I think a lot of the wandering that we've seen in the market through the latter half, really all of this week, has been due to that volume. And we may see this kind of volume through much of summer. So just be aware of this. And that means we probably have to be that much more stringent about our setups, not allow for as many aggro trades to come through, but really require high levels of clarity and organization, and or really be much more open to playing the options so we have a little bit more latitude for when the market floats around. Okay, gang, that's the mid-morning update. I'll see you in the next update.